half a day. I'm Adriana Cotero, and I am joined here with the Guam Department of Education Superintendent, Jon Fernandez. And we have a lot of things to update everyone on in regards to education as a whole. A lot of new things have been happening, but hi, Jon, how are you?
Good, and yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of things happening, a lot of things coming up. So I'm glad we have a chance to catch up.
Yes, of course. And let's just start from, one of the latest things that happened this week, which was with the Stimbo Grab and Go meal program site. You had to close it down. There was an employee that had tested positive there. Can you give us any new updated information on that?
Right. So, this summer, I mean, it's really an opportunity for us to test out all of our protocols and our responses as it relates to COVID-19. And our stance is to be as conservative and as cautious as possible. So we did hear over the weekend that one of the workers at the site tested positive as part of contact tracing that had occurred from public health from a prior positive test, I guess. And upon being notified, we made the immediate decision, of course, on erring on the side of safety, to go ahead and close the entire site down, and to have all 63 individuals who were involved in school, whether they were staff from DOE, whether they were Sodexo, whether they were AmeriCorps volunteers, or anybody else who was involved in the operation, to go ahead and go get tested. We know that in many cases, there's typically more of an investigation to identify those immediate contacts and so forth. But we really pressed Department of Public Health to try to test every one of our workers on site, so that we could have that confidence that they're able to be that we can open up again. And so right now, we don't have any results yet to be able to talk about whether we are aware of any positives on campus from anybody else. But we do know that they've been tested, and my understanding is voluntary quarantine for 14 days. So they're not allowed to report to work or to the site, or to, if there are some workers from other schools, they can't report back to work at all until after July 16th, which is the last day of quarantine.
So does that mean the site will be closed down until then?
Absolutely. We're going to close down the site, just do our cleaning and disinfecting to make sure we're good to go. But again, this is kind of our protocol that we've adopted with FB Leon Guerrero and with Stimbo Elementary, and we just decided that whether or not anybody had been in contact with that individual worker at all, if you're on site, we want you tested. We want to just clean, and we'll go from there and continue to improve our protocols as we work with public health on the best ways to continue responding should we see these types of situations happen.
Okay, and about how many employees were stationed there at that site that underwent testing?
Yeah, so my information is that we identified 63 individuals who worked in one capacity or other during the time frame identified. And so all 63 individuals have been accommodated to be tested, and will require clearance from public health to be able to return after the 14-day quarantine.
And while we're just on the topic with Grab and Go meal program, that program is expected to go until the end of summer school, which is the end of this month, correct?
Right, to July 31st is our end date.
So to date, about how many meals have you guys served now?
Boy, it's looking like, I think the last count was about 2 million meals, in terms of 12,000 school breakfasts and lunches on a daily basis since I believe March 23rd. So it's been it's a large volume, and we continue to monitor the count, because we know that over time there may be a different level of demand. And so while we may have reduced in a couple of sites some meals, maybe by 50 to 100 meals, we are still seeing a high number. So the number still is close to 12,000 breakfasts and lunches being served. So we're just glad to be able to continue to support that need, and we're starting to think through, what's going to happen when we reopen schools. We're likely not going to be able to serve in the same fashion, but again, we realize and recognize that the need for food is really a primary issue in our community, and so it's very important that we try to figure out a way that we can continue to help.
And with reopening schools, is August 15th still the target date?
So August 11th is actually
Or-
our scheduled date for opening for classes. What happened, but the original and approved schedule states is that August 7th, I believe August 7th, 9th and 10th are teacher, well, 7th and 10th are teacher work days and professional development, and then classes start on August 11th. But recognizing that we just put in place a new plan for the reopening of schools, we are calling our joint calendar committee to meet, and they will be meeting over the coming days to sort out and recommend any changes to the calendar that might be necessary. So one of the proposals that we are going to put forward, and we hope will be able to be accommodated, is we would like to ensure that there are sufficient training opportunities before we welcome students back to class in that first week or so. So we're going to be working. The Joint Calendar Committee is comprised of representatives of management on the GDOE side, as well as representatives from our Guam Federation of Teachers, representing the teachers union and the staff representatives. So together, we want to make sure we address the calendar in a way that is manageable, takes into consideration the need for safe operations of schools, and then also in that first week, there's so many changes that we're planning that we need to give our teachers and their staff an opportunity to readjust to those coming changes and be prepared when those first students start showing up at our schools. So we're talking about distance learning. It needs to be focusing on how we're going to deliver online instruction and how we anticipate the schools rolling that out. We're talking about the safety protocols. We want all of our teachers and staff to be aware of what happens, during the course of a day, what cleaning is required, what face masks or face shields are required, where students are supposed to be walking or not, not walking during the course of the day, responses to emergencies and so forth. And then the third major piece is, we really want our teachers and our staff to focus first on the well-being of our employees and our students who are returning. I think we've said this before. This has been a pretty traumatic period of time. We know that kids and employees have been isolated at home under the shutdown, a lot of anxiety and uncertainty in the air. So before we get down to academics, we really want to allow for some time early on in the school year to focus in on the well-being of our stakeholders. So we're doing training. It's going to take place for our 12-month employees, our principals, in July and before we start up school. And then in that first week, we want to really have that conversation that what matters most to us now is that we have a safe return of our students, that they adjust back and have an opportunity to discuss some of the issues and concerns and things that have been raised during the pandemic that they probably want to have a chance to discuss with their teachers and classmates. And then we can move on to the academic side and get going on that front.
So, John, the last time I had spoke with you, we were at the press conference and you guys were announcing the plan and also signing the resolution. So maybe in a nutshell, just for those that don't know, can you explain what the three, essentially what the plan is, and then the three models that are being provided and offered to parents to choose from? And additionally, what is some of the feedbacks? I know there was a parent survey that you had sent out requesting information from parents on what model they would likely want their child to follow. So are they mostly wanting to do distance learning or a hybrid of the two, or what's it looking like?
Okay, so there's three pillars to our plan, and again, it's safety, it's distance learning, and it's mental health and social-emotional well-being. So safety comes first, and so we've been following closely the CDC guidelines and the evolving discussion about the safe opening of schools. In fact, I was on a webinar discussion this morning at 6 a.m. learning about the international experience with reopening schools. So I think we feel very well positioned in terms of our safety recommendations, face masks or face shields, face coverings, the physical distancing that we were requiring, and staggered schedules or alternate schedules, as well as on at home home learning as part of that strategy. So when safety comes first, it means that we're not able to bring all of our students back to school for day-to-day instruction all at once. And so If we put safety first, then we're obviously going to have to make an adjustment to the models of learning. And that's why we've been discussing the three models that are out there, which is an option to go 100% online at home. It's to go 100% at home with hard copies in case you don't have a computer on the first day of school or reliable internet access. And those are things that you'd like to resolve, but on day one, you have the option of staying home and getting the home lessons that you can pick up at school and work on at home. And then the third is really a mix of in-class, in-class instruction, as well as days where you're going to be at home learning. And so that means that we're expecting a third of the students being able to come back on any one day and going in an alternating schedule so that they can get some level of classroom instruction face to face with the teacher, but that's still going to require them to do some of their work and their projects at home, when they're not in the classroom. So we put that out there. When we got the first survey done, that was really an assessment of what parents cared about as part of the overall approach to reopening. Safety by far, I remember talking about 90%, 95%, 98% of very strong feelings about making sure that the safety parameters are enforced and in place. So when it comes to face masks, physical distancing, frequent cleaning, frequent hand washing, that is by far the biggest concern for parents at this point. So what's good about that is that it shows that all the public, broadcasting of these safety parameters really has taken root. And so families expect that that's going to be the same case at school. So that was really important for us to know, and maybe that'll change over the year, but at this point, they want us to be safe and to assure them that we're doing what we can to mitigate any of the risks. The second issue is gathering information relative to the preferences that families have for what type of learning they want to engage in when we reopen. Now, we're not saying this is going to be for the entire year. I mean, if we could get all of our kids back in school at one time, back to normal, we would love to do so. But we're not, but the option of doing that is not on the table. So we definitely don't want to go without any type of options for our students. So we, again, with the three models, we've asked our parents and guardians to basically fill out the model of learning registration form. Our schools have been pushing those out by email. They've been calling families to get that information. In fact, some of our staff have made home visits to those who were unable to be reached by phone. Anyone who hasn't been able to fill out that form, they ought to contact their school. They can go to our website for that contact information, but contact the school directly. So what we want to gather is how many students are going to be in that 100% online, 100% hard copy, or that alternating schedule option. And once we get that information, we can organize ourselves. So we don't have that done yet. The deadline is Friday to get that in. I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure if we still need to go out and gather those who've not responded, we'll make that effort. But the real challenge is to get as much of that information as early as possible, so we can organize ourselves around how we're going to provide those options for learning. What I was able to do was take one school and take a look at where they were in terms of that information. And it really is going to force us to rethink how we're doing everything, because 70% of the students who responded, or the families who responded, wanted some version of 100% home learning. So you can imagine, out of let's just say out of a population of 1,000 students, which might be a regular middle school, and you're looking at 700 of them wanting to do online learning or the hard copy learning at home, and the remaining 300 coming to school. It really kind of shows you where you need to focus your efforts in terms of providing the instruction. And that's the kind of school level information we need so that the schools can begin to organize themselves accordingly.
What school is that you are using as a test run?
I don't want to share that yet because we're still gathering. That might not be the end result. And I don't know if it's representative of the other schools, but it is one of our middle schools. So if you can think about a middle school, typically they're talking about populations in the 800 to 1,200 range, and thinking about what happens if, let's just say we end up with 70% who want to be at home. Clearly, parents are showing that they're not ready and comfortable putting their kids back in school yet, and are looking for those options. And so instead of us anticipating that we're going to have a lot of that population back in person, it's going to really force us to think about the quality of the online and at-home instruction and what we can do to support the parents at home and provide that coaching or that homework assistance or that tutoring to make sure that we are serving those students as best as possible.
Okay, and John, we have a few questions here in regards to the reopening of the school year, so I'm just going to ask them right now on behalf of everyone.
Sure.
But it's one of the questions is, will all the teachers and employees be getting tested before opening the school?
So right now, that is not in the plan. In fact, I believe we just read CDC guidance that does not recommend testing everybody before the reopening of school. I know that the priority really is, in terms of testing, is really going to those who are symptomatic or part of the contact tracing when symptomatic cases are determined to be positive. So I know there is a prioritization of testing that's already in place. We've been asking that same question. I know the guidelines that we just read from CDC do not recommend or require that everyone get tested, but it does require that we put some those safety measures in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
And I'm sure you'll have more details on this once you do get those surveys back on Friday, but what about busing?
Busing, we're still in that conversation. I believe the latest was definitely there is going to be a form of social distancing. I'm not sure exactly what that will mean in terms of total capacity on the school bus, but definitely a more limited capacity because we're not going to be able to crowd those school buses as you might find on a normal day. And in fact, if we're doing an alternating schedule, that might help by not having every student, who normally rides the bus on that bus. But there will be a form of social distancing, face masks being required, as well as regular cleaning after each trip. Beyond that, we're still kind of working out the details with the department. I have a call I need to make with the director to kind of see what else we can do to support each other. But definitely, the question we had is kind of working out the seating capacity and really trying to get a handle on the frequency of cleaning, which is one of our concerns was about, whether or not they'd be able to clean after every trip. And that definitely will be the case. My understanding, of course, is bus drivers will get temperature checks in the morning before they get on the buses as well. We had talked about temperature checks for bus riders coming on the bus. That's not going to be a possibility simply because of the way the buses operate and stopping in the middle of a street and having kids line up and waiting to come in. That might be not be a possibility at this point, but definitely when they get to school, that temperature check will take place at the school.
So with limited capacity on the buses and then having to sanitize, does that mean a lot more traffic with buses having to go back and forth then from school to homes?
It's going to depend. I think we haven't gone down to that route level, right? I mean, the route level, when you go up north is where you see the most crowded routes. On a normal school day, there are some routes that might have to do what you call double backs, where they take a group to school and have to go back to get the remainder. We certainly hope that won't be the case when we have alternating schedules and you're seeing a much lower population actually physically going to school. But again, we're going to have to look at those numbers once we get all the information about who's actually going to come to school and what routes they're going to be on so we can plan accordingly. So we don't have all that information yet, but as soon as we get that information from parents as to whether they expect their kids to come to school, we can do some of that more detailed investigation regarding the routes and how they'll be affected.
Okay, and something else I want to address, and I know you're aware of the district court case right now, and we had asked you previously for a response. I don't know if you want to provide one now, just about in regards to that. But I also know that the Vice Speaker, Selena Nelson, she held a meeting recently with GDOE last Thursday, I believe, and she kind of addressed some of the wanting to improve the programs for students with special needs. So if you could just give us some feedback from that meeting too.
Right. So on the case, I'm not going to comment on the details of the litigation, except to say just generally, we're as frustrated as the parents are as well with regard to being able to open or not open our schools. I mean, we would love things to be back to normal. Unfortunately, they're not. We still operate under an executive order and under a pandemic condition of readiness 2, which does not allow us to open yet, and we don't have approval from public health or the governor's office regarding the plan we submitted to try to reopen schools. So we again, frustrating for us, and we certainly understand, especially our parents of our most vulnerable students. We would like to be back to normal. In fact, the plan we put forward, we only consider as a phase, as phase one of trying to recover and get back to normal. But in reality, we want all our kids back in school. We think there are supports that our kids get in school that they may not get at home or in the community, whether it's food, whether it's counseling, whether it's the special education services and other related services. Those things happen at school, and when schools aren't able to be opened, that's it's hard to be able to serve our kids, all of our kids. So with regard to the hearing that we had with Vice Speaker Nelson, the focus was on our kids with autism spectrum
Mhm.
disorder. We have about 241 students who are identified in that with the autism, with autism. And that's a number that's grown over the last, 6 to 8 years. And it really is forcing us to kind of think through and have that discussion about how we can improve services. So we explained, what we do, and basically, our responsibility is to, under the federal law, our responsibility is to ensure the free and appropriate public education for students with disabilities. And that requires that we sit down around the table in a collaborative fashion with parents, with our educators, and with professionals to determine what services each child needs to access the curriculum in our school. And so it's important that those individualized plans be done, and the services that are recommended out of those plans, we want to provide if we can. So I think the discussion that we had was basically around autism and whether or not applied behavioral analysis, which is a particular kind of therapy, whether that should be among the services offered to students or required of students. And that was really the gist of that discussion. So ABA therapy is relatively new on Guam and actually in many states. I know that Hunter Speaks is an organization that was represented at the hearing. They say they have a plan to provide services to students and to build capacity so that there are more licensed professionals who can provide that therapy on island. I think at this point we only have one behavioral analysts, licensed analysts on island, as well as only one registered behavior technician. So there is limited capacity, but they say they have a plan to expand that capacity. And what I've invited them to do is to share that plan with us so we can understand it and see it. In fact, I'm hoping to reach out to them with one of our board members and see if we can go over to Hunter Speaks where they're currently in service, so we can have a better understanding of what they're doing to work with our children. So I took it in the positive way that it's something that's developing that we need to have more education and awareness on.
Mhm.
And again, if our individualized, education plans require that type of therapy, then we need to do our best to figure out how we can address that requirement.
Okay, and I just want to also touch on while I have you real quick, sorry, the Education Stabilization Fund and the CARES Act funding. Where are we? Any advancements with that and the allocations? Because I know that goes for public, private, and charter schools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're working on finalizing the budgets as part of that, but the primary focus right now is on our what we call our PPEs, right? Our protective equipment and supplies that we need for our employees and our students. And that not only does that apply to our GDOE schools, it applies to our charter schools and our private partners. So we're going on two fronts. We're trying to get on the local side. We're pushing forward with what is an indefinite quantity bid procurement to allow us to purchase supplies over the course of the year. And so that's in process to get that going. But our more immediate conversations are happening with Defense Logistics, which is an entity that's allowing us to ride on federal procurement to be able to access to the Department of Defense to access and expedite some of those supplies so we can have them for the start of the school year. So right now we are continuing to discuss and plan for that delivery of supplies. I know that in recent discussions, one of the challenges is, of course, even though it's the Department of Defense, they're worldwide, and so we're basically competing with everybody else trying to get the same kind of supplies. So we're really trying to make sure that we have a manageable and feasible level of supplies that can be delivered to us and then brought in so we can open up schools. So I know, it's a big order. We've been looking for face masks, cleaning supplies, temperature scanners, and so forth. We're now talking about whether we can get them quarterly or monthly and how we can expedite them before we start school. So hopefully in the next day or so, we can get confirmation of when we would expect, the first shipment. And then that'll give us the way to plan how we can get that out to all of our schools in time for school opening.
I was going to say, you need that before August 11th.
It's a requirement for us. We're not going to open until we have those in place. So it is one of the contingencies that is very important. Not just to us, but our private and charter partners. And that's going to be a requirement for us in order to open. So we're making that priority number one.
Okay. Anything else you want to address? Any other further updates that you have for us?
I just wanted the community to know that we are, working hard to reopen because we know that our school system and private charter schools are important parts of the recovery effort. There's a lot of supports that kids get at school. We know that as the economy rebuilds, parents and guardians are going to have to go back to work. So we're looking at the options and we're evaluating how we can provide that community support and get our kids back. But obviously safety comes first. So we're always going to make safety the priority, and we're not going to open up unless we think we can do so in a way that mitigates the risks that are out there regarding COVID-19. So we're going to be continuing to communicate over the next few weeks with our parents, whether it's in print, whether it's through conversations like this with our media partners or other methods of outreach, because we know there are a lot of questions that are still out there that need to be answered. And of course, there's a lot of work that we're doing to try to answer those questions at the same time. So we know that between now and mid-August, we expect to have a lot more conversations, and we hope the community will listen in, call the schools if you have questions, and let us know what you need. But definitely pay attention to the news and our Facebook page and our social media platforms to make sure you're well informed as we get closer to that start date.
And actually, real quick, John, I know we're reaching 30 minutes here, but if I could ask you where we're at with the commodities, and because I know you were trying to make that so the program could expand as well.
So we did get approval to expand the income eligibility for our commodities, our food commodities. So, that's a major operation. I'm very thankful to the Guam Police Department and, of course, the Department of Public Works and volunteers and everyone who's come, other agencies who've come by to kind of support us in the effort to get food out to our community members and to our households out there by expanding from 150% of poverty to 400% of poverty. While that isn't a pretty dramatic expansion, it actually is in line with many of our Western states who are at 300 or 400% of poverty. So we think we're in good ground. We got the approval of USDA. That allows us to continue to provide broad support to all the households that have been impacted by COVID-19. All those households where someone might have been unemployed, released from employment, or furloughed with reduced hours. Where food's a priority, we want to provide that support, and that'll, the expansion of eligibility allows us to make sure that we, don't focus in on the administrative side. We have more flexibility to get these food products out to our families more as efficiently as we can. We thank everybody for the patience that they've shown. I mean, it's really troubling when we see long lines of cars waiting for food. But at the same time, I think if people are patient and you allow us to improve how we operate, I think we'll do well together trying to get our community through this hard time.
And that's back at the PD warehouse, correct?
So we'll be back at the PD warehouse, but we're obviously continuing discussions to determine what we can do and to meet the need of the community. And so, should things change, we'll definitely let everybody know.
Okay, all right. And then, so by Friday, that's when you guys are hoping to have all the parent surveys in, just in case, parents and guardians do not know how can they turn those surveys in or even get information on that.
Right. So if you haven't been emailed if you haven't been called by your school, if you haven't been visited, because we know that in some cases, some of our school employees who weren't able to reach parents on that listed contact number went out to the households and to the housing areas with their face masks and gloves and everything to try to get those forms out to parents. If you haven't been contacted in any of those ways, we ask you to please contact your school directly. The contact information is on our website, our DOE website at www.gdoe.net. If you don't know how to contact your school, give them a call, let them know you want to fill out the models for learning registration, and get that information in quick. That'll help us plan and provide more details for the year to come.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate everyone tuning in and listening. We'll see you back here next week, same time, for another check-in.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for getting the word out and getting the updates out to the community. We appreciate that. Thanks.
All right. Bye.